Pushback against Shanghai's restrictions are getting more violent. Protests between residents and law enforcement have sparked authorities to ramp up the rules. Reports say those problems aren't limited to Chinese citizens in the global financial hub either. Foreigners living in the city are also dying at home. Trillions of dollars in intellectual property reported stolen after Chinese state-linked hackers attacked over 30 companies from the US, Europe, and Asia. But the onslaught isn't over. And an American company is trying to revive traditional Chinese culture that was almost lost. But Beijing is trying to put a stop to it, even from an ocean away. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. More protests are popping up in Shanghai. The city has been under strict lockdown measures for over a month. Food shortages and lack of medical care have triggered anger among the city's 26 million population. On Saturday in Shanghai's Zhuanqiao area, a fight broke out between residents requesting food and people dressed in full-body personal protective equipment. Those wearing the white suits could be serving a number of different functions. Some of them may be volunteers distributing food, some may be policemen or soldiers brought in to enforce lockdown rules. Residents posted details about the conflict on social media. They say it all started when a young man and resident shouted at the law enforcement and workers from his home requesting food. His comments reportedly provoked them, prompting them to go upstairs to silence the man. That's when other residents stepped in. The issue developed to a fight, with residents on one side and law enforcement and pandemic workers on the other. During the tussle, some residents went downstairs and tried to rush out of the building's gate. That's as law enforcement tried to hold the door closed. After a brief struggle, the residents managed to get out. Many of them went after the police officers, and violence broke out. Some of the officers were seen fleeing the scene, with residents chasing them down the street. Residents in other nearby buildings were heard egging on the scuffle, encouraging the freed residents to beat up the police and pandemic workers. The next day, local authorities issued an announcement. It stated that residents in the building had sufficient food at home, suggesting there was no reason to protest. The announcement went on to say that those who led the protest were provoking trouble and had been detained. Authorities also urged other residents to cooperate with the local COVID-19 measures. More tragedies in Shanghai amid extended lockdown orders. One man was found dead at his Shanghai home earlier this month. His neighbor broke the news through China's Twitter equivalent Weibo, adding that an eyewitness said when he died, he was all skin and bones. The deceased was a 58-year-old man living alone. He was last seen by his neighbor on April 12th, when the city's second food distribution began. But a week later, the man told his neighbor he couldn't get out of bed. His neighbor contacted the local neighborhood committee, hoping they could send someone to help. But no one came. He was never seen again until almost 2 weeks later, when he was found dead leaning against his door. In the post on Weibo, his neighbor wrote, "Just one visit from the neighborhood committee would have saved him." The post was immediately removed, seemingly censored by Chinese authorities. More reports from Shanghai indicate Chinese citizens aren't the only ones struggling to cope under lockdown. So far, 2 confirmed deaths of foreigners living in the financial hub have come to light. A 40-year-old South Korean man was found dead at home in Shanghai. South Korea's biggest portal site, Naver.com, reported the news last week. The cause of his death is unknown. He's said to have had a heart condition. Last month, a 29-year-old woman from South Africa was also found dead at home in Shanghai. Her cause of death is unknown. According to a South African media outlet, the woman was an English teacher. She had worked in Shanghai since 2017. Since lockdown orders took effect, she had been working from home while keeping in contact with her family in South Africa. But one Sunday in mid-April, her family could no longer reach her. American cybersecurity firm Cybereason reported last Wednesday that Chinese state-linked hackers have been trying to steal data from over 30 manufacturing and technology companies. The aim is to expand China's economy. The targeted companies are based in the U.S., Europe, and Asia. Cybereason CEO Lear Div told CBS News that the hackers target blueprints of fighter jets, helicopters, and missiles. In pharmaceuticals, they steal intellectual property of drugs, including ones that treat diabetes and depression. The firm discovered the hacking activities last year, which might have started 3 years ago and are still in process. CBS News said that a Chinese state-backed hacking group called APT-41 has stolen trillions of dollars in intellectual property from these companies. APT-41 launched CCP-backed espionage activities and serves the regime's Made in China 2025 plan. It's an ambitious plan to beat the U.S. and make sure China dominates the world economy by 2025. Last year, the U.S. Justice Department charged 4 Chinese nationals associated with APT-41. They had hacked into computers to steal intellectual property and business data. FBI Director Christopher Wray said recently that China has a bigger hacking program than that of every other major nation combined. And their biggest target is, of course, the United States. Cybereason said that in the U.S., the loss caused by hacking is in the trillions, not billions, and that the real impact cannot be seen until 5 to 10 years later. A New York-based company is trying to revive China's traditional culture on the world stage. But the Chinese Communist Party is trying to stop that from happening, this time in Mexico. Here's more.
Beijing is trying to block an American company from performing shows in Mexico. The arts troupe is called Shen Yun, a premier classical Chinese dance and music company. Shen Yun says its mission is to revive the 5,000 years of traditional Chinese culture through art. It's based in New York and tours around the world every year. But the Chinese regime is urging 3 Mexican cities to cancel the performance there.
We were very concerned about the situation.
Jenny Garcia is a local presenter for Shen Yun. She says the Chinese embassy has reached out to Mexican officials through email and letters.
When I first read it, I couldn't believe what was going on.
In a letter to the government of Querétaro, a city in central Mexico, the Chinese embassy said allowing the performance there could, quote, mislead Mexican people and undermine China's relationship with Mexico.
The fact that the Chinese Communist regime comes to Mexico and tells us what we can and can't do is a violation of our own sovereignty.
Mexico is not a standalone case. Beijing has been trying to block Shen Yun from performing in other countries and regions, like the U.S., Asia, and Europe. The regime pressured theaters to not sign contracts with Shen Yun. In some instances, it told theaters if they didn't cancel the show, that country's relationship with China would suffer.
Shen Yun presents what China would be like if communism did not exist and presents a show where they show you the dynasties and all that culture has been literally annihilated by the Chinese Communist Party.
That culture was once almost lost. After the Communist Party took over China in 1949, it almost destroyed China's traditional culture through a series of political movements. Shen Yun says it's trying to bring this ancient culture to life on stage. The arts troupe has been performing in Mexico for 7 years.
We were supposed to have a show in 2020.
But then the pandemic hit, and the show was canceled.
So many people reserved the tickets for 2 years, and they were really waiting for this moment to see the show.
Shen Yun already kicked off its performances in Mexico last Friday.
I was looking forward to it for more than 2 years, because previously when they were going to perform, I was expecting the show. Unfortunately, the world stopped, and we had to wait. So it is wonderful to return to the theaters, to the stages, to relive all this part that we were missing so much, and with a show of this quality.
As for other theaters that have come under pressure from Beijing,
they are very supportive of the show, and they said all our support, and we are really going to keep on as we have planned to host the show.
Shows in other Mexican cities are almost sold out. Other Shen Yun troops are now touring in California and Paris.
President Joe Biden will meet with South Korea's new president in 2 weeks as part of his first Asia trip since starting his term. South Korea is one of the U.S.'s most important strategic partners in the region. Issues on the table: threats from nuclear-armed North Korea, and beyond that, countering the Chinese Communist Party. We hear from former U.S. State Department ambassador to learn more.
When South Korean President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol takes the helm this week, he's expected to reset the country's foreign policy. The quickest way to summarize the shift is 2 no's and 1 yes. Taking a break from the 3 no's policy of the current Moon administration, Yoon said he will be saying no to both North Korea and China while embracing the U.S. with a big yes.
Having someone who would stand together potentially, and maybe, frankly, it might be the U.S. side, it would make a big difference.
Former Ambassador at Large Morse Tan served under the Trump administration. He says the shift will determine how South Korea will deal with its nuclear-armed northern neighbor, and adds the only chance for progress is through a robust diplomacy.
When that sort of approach was used previously, that had stopped the missile tests, that had caused a return of the U.S. citizens who were being held captive, that brought home the remains of Korean War veterans. There were a number of different positive results that occurred. It changed the nature of the propaganda that North Korea was using. So it's clear that that sort of approach has more upside to it than a very passive approach, such as the former strategic patience, which was a fancy way of basically saying doing very little.
The U.S. has been the largest deterrent to North Korean aggression. That's as North Korean missile and nuclear development continued apace with the latest testing launched last Wednesday, the 14th known weapons test so far this year. Experts warn more launches may take place as Yoon takes office.
And it's really China that has been the greatest support to North Korea. Over 90% of the economic interactions with the world are with China. And so in a lot of ways, it's China that has propped up this malignant regime that has all these concentration camps, that destroys its own people.
Since the Korean War, China has often compared its relationship with North Korea to a Chinese saying, "If the lips are gone, then the teeth will be cold." Today, China remains North Korea's largest supplier of imports and exports and helps the country obtain foreign currency despite it violating sanctions. China's interests in North Korea have been tied to negotiations with the U.S., though that doesn't mean Beijing is prepared for a direct clash.
China has constantly stressed stability, and they've even rebuked the North Korean leadership for destabilizing activities. And so I don't think China thinks it's ready for a direct confrontation with the United States.
Now with Yoon bringing South Korea deeper into a U.S. embrace, can the president-elect still have his cake from China, South Korea's largest export market? Beijing appears to be watching closely.
That's all for today's China in Focus on YouTube. We're now sharing a shortened version of our program here, after being demonetized for more than a year. Here's what to look out for in our second half. How will South Korea's new pro-Washington outlook affect U.S.-China rivalry? How will China respond? We take a deeper look at the issue with former Ambassador Morse Tan. And the Chinese regime's censorship efforts are reaching new heights. Now, they're targeting foreign technology. Our full episode can be watched on our partner platform, Bok TV. To sign up for a free 14-day trial, please click the link down below. Thanks for watching China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Mai, and see you tomorrow.
Presenting the heritage of traditional Chinese martial arts, promoting martial ethics, and reviving the true tradition. The 2022 NTD International Traditional Chinese Martial Arts Competition preliminaries will be held in New York and Taiwan. On August 28th, the finals will be broadcast live online worldwide. Registration hotline 188-477-9228. For more information, please visit martialarts.ntdtv.com.